Hey, good morning. Pete, North Las Vegas. We're getting ready to finish up this Colt A2 HBAR clone build. And first thing we're going to do is get the Delta slip ring assembled onto the barrel net. But before we actually do that, there's something that I thought I would share with you on circlips or snap rings, whatever you'd like to call this. In most applications, these are directional, meaning you shouldn't just put them on in any orientation or not pay attention to it. And we'll just spend a minute or two talking about that. Okay, so when they stamp these things out at the factory, these circlips or snap rings, there'll be a sharp side, and you can see right here on this edge, as soon as I get my pointer in there, you can see that that's sharp. And on the external dimensions, it's maybe not quite as pronounced, but if you run your finger across the internal, the IDs of this, you can definitely feel a sharp edge versus a radiused edge. So I just flipped it over and you can see that that side is got a slight radius to it. So why is that important? Well, depending on how you put that circlip or snap ring into that slot, and depending on which direction the load is coming from or thrust, dictates how you should install this. So what you want to do is on any kind of shaft or collar or anything that's using a slot on this snap ring is you want to face the sharp edge away from the load. And the sharp edge on this circlip or snap ring will allow this thing to seat better up against the cut of the groove. And in the transportation industry, automotive, motorcycles, aircraft, ships, trains, mechanics that have been around the block a few times know that if you put this in the wrong orientation, like on a transmission shaft, there is the possibility that because you use the radius edge up against that slot on the wrong side of the load, that if you get enough load and pressure, that snap ring can walk out of that groove. And one of my other hobbies, if you're around the channel often enough, is dirt biking, and I do my own engine work. And just to show you some documented proof that I'm not full of shit, I'm going to show you one of my dirt bike manuals and what they say about it. Okay, so this is one of my old dirt bike manuals, and just to show you that I'm not the only one that feels this way, this is kind of a breakdown of part of the transmission on the bike. And you'll see here it says, note, seat the circlip in the groove and locate its end as shown in the illustration. Let's come over to the illustration. Now what they're showing is a side view of the circlip. And they're showing you that the circlip has a radius side. Now they kind of exaggerated this just to show you. And then they're showing you the direction of load or thrust that might be pushing up against that circlip. So they're showing you the correct orientation. So when I say these things are directional, I'm not the only one that feels that way. Okay, so back to the circlip, the snap ring real quick. On this application here, you know, if you got the wrong side up in the groove, how much is it going to matter? If you're just using finger pressure on the Delta ring to get your hand guards off, I don't think you're going to have any issues. The only time you might have an issue is if you use this tool, and some of you are familiar with this tool, and how this puts pressure on the slip ring. Let me get it the right way. To push this back and collapse it into the wave spring to get your hand guards off easier. There is a possibility if you use this tool that maybe you could put enough thrust or load on this snap ring to maybe possibly dislodge it. Now, like I said, the likelihood of any of this happen is, it's probably not going to happen. But the only reason I bring up a snap ring or circlip orientation is because there's a right way and a wrong way to put it on. So even though maybe nothing bad's going to happen if you put it on the wrong way, it's like why not put it on the right way? So that's my argument. Okay, so everything's installed. The snap ring sharp edge is facing to the rear. And like I said earlier, I know I'm kind of repeating myself. Does it really matter on an AR platform? Probably not, but why not put it on the right way? Okay, so I always make sure I get a little bit of lubrication on the part of the extension that's going to make contact with the barrel net. There's some people say not to use copper, especially if it has graphite in it. I tore apart a rifle that I used copper anti-seize on it probably 15, 16 years ago, and I decided to make some changes to the rifle and took the barrel off, and I've never had any issues. I've used copper anti-seize in industrial settings, very moist, wet environments, never had any issues. So even though aeroshell is probably the preferred, I've never had a problem using copper anti-seize. So anyway, we're going to get this thing on here. This is my Midwest Industries, my opinion, one of the best on the market, upper receiver rod. And like I said, I'm going to try to get everything lined up, get that gas tube lined up. And, you know, around 50 foot-pounds would be ideal for me. Okay, so I ended up right at 50 and get everything spaced. Just a little tiny bit of back and forth movement, so that means it's like perfect in the in one of these barrel net slots. Everything lined up perfectly, so we're good. 50 foot-pounds, right where I wanted to be. Okay, we got our gas tube pinned. Just a little bit of grease stuck in there. It did not go uneventful. These Wheeler tools are junk. And as soon as I get done with this build, this stuff's going in the trash. What happens is, even using the correct style, the edge of the tool gets rounded over because it's a very soft, cheap, mild steel. It's not properly hardened. So what happens is, when the edge rolls over, then the pin starts to mushroom. So like I said, this was not an alignment issue. Everything was properly aligned. It's just as I was tapping this roll pin in for the gas tube, these things are just junk. Okay, so anyway, I happen to have a spare pin. We got the gas tube properly installed. I'm checking gas tube alignment. Everything goes good. So there's no interference. I think I showed it at the beginning of the video. Maybe I didn't, but I did measure the gas tube and it came in right at about 15 1/8. Okay, so we're going to headspace this. Now, I already headspaced this barrel with a spare bolt that I had just to get it up to trajectory arms in Utah to make sure I wasn't going to have any issues with the barrel. But we're going to double check and headspace the actual bolt that I will be using with this build. Okay, so we got our go gauge in there, so let's see if this thing closes up. By the way, this is a Wilson Combat BCG. It's their non-logo version. Just standard phosphate. Okay, went in the battery, so we're good. On a go. Okay, so that's our no-go. So let's see if, make sure we don't close on that. All right, I'm gonna put more pressure on it off camera, but right now it's not going in the battery. We just pretty good amount of pressure, but let me double check that off camera because I can't do it with one hand. Okay, so everything checked out good. Passed on a go and a no-go. Okay, so this part of the video is going to be a handguard comparison between Colt, Windham Weaponry, and I just got these in from Fulton Armory. So the first thing we're going to notice is where the slip ring engages on the Colt and the Windham Weaponry. And whoa, hey, where did they go on the Fulton Armories? Anyway, I checked the slip ring fitment, and there's just enough here for the edge of this to bottom out in the slip ring and still get good enough engagement, but that is not right. So that's the first issue with Fulton Armory. Okay, so on the heat shield, this is the Colt we're looking at, and you can see how the sides kind of overlap or interlock with each other. And same thing on Windham Weapory. And then you get in here and it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. We got a big gap. Plenty of ways for heat to get around that gap and escape, and maybe heat up your handguard if you're dumping magazines. And we'll split these apart and we'll take a look at the insides. And then we'll get some close-ups on the externals and see how those match up. Okay, so this is my old Colt. It's got the do not remove stamping in there. You can see the locating tabs look pretty good on the rails. You have a raised section and then you have an indented section. So Colt looks pretty good. This is Windham Weapory. And you might notice that Windham Weapory put some type of adhesive in there. I'm assuming it's some type of high temp stuff. Does not have the do not remove. But in my opinion, the Windham Weapory gets the win on this one. And here's the piece of crap I got from Fulton Armory. And you can see the tabs isn't even bent right back here or made it up into the slot. I mean, yeah, I could fix that, but not quite as good. No adhesive. Okay, so the Colt has a little bit slightly shinier appearance than the Windham and the Fulton, but these are used. I had them on a rifle for quite a few years, so there may be a little bit of oil that's impregnated into the plastic, giving that appearance. But we'll look at the ribbing. You can see there's a little bit of difference in the ribbing between the Colt, Windham Weapory, and the Fulton Armory. And Fulton Armory has kind of a parting line that angles back here. And then once again, we have the back end of the handguard where there's just very little for the slip ring to engage on. So if I had to rate these as far as quality and fitment and just overall how they're built, other than knowing which actual materials, what type of resin or fiberglass or whatever they use to make these, just based on cosmetically alone, I would have to give it to the Windham Weapory. I would say overall this was the best handguard. And Colt runs a close second. And this is a piece of crap. And it's probably going in the trash can. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do on this build is get the flash hider indexed. It doesn't quite make it without a washer or a shim. So we're going to have to back it off to right about there. That'll be the size of the gap that we need. And we'll get it properly timed. And I usually put these, I try to put them on the low end. The range for a GI spec A2 is 15 to 20 foot-pounds, but I try to go on the lower end, around 12, 15 pounds. So we'll get that indexed. Okay, so I do have an actual peel washer, but I just decided to go with shims. And the reason I didn't use a crush washer or a jam nut is because I'm trying to, as much as possible, make this look like my actual 1990s Colt A2 HBAR sporter that uses a peel washer. So the shims kind of look like a peel washer. And like I said, I do actually have one. I just didn't feel like messing with it. So we're just going to use shims. Anyway, it took me a few tries, but I kind of got it to where I want it. So we'll just go put about 15 foot-pounds on this thing and the muzzle will be done. Okay, so I ended up around 13, 14 foot-pounds, close enough to bottom end spec of 15. I think the shims kind of, they look like a peel washer to me. I got my old Windham handguards on. Good fit. No gaps. Just one last check, and that's to make sure that when we come down with the receiver, that the back of the bolt is going to push the buffer off of the retainer. So we'll see if that happens. Yeah, that came off quite a bit. So we're good. Okay, well, that's going to be it for today. Next video, I'll get my old Colt Sporter that I bought back in 1990 out, and we'll compare the rifles as far as looks and cosmetics and some of the changes I had to make because things just aren't available anymore to build a really super accurate clone. But it'll pass the 4-foot test. All right, Pete, North Las Vegas, over and out for now.